on Craigslist, found one and went to the person's home, bought it, and then I was dressed like this. So the person asked me who I was, and I said I was a monk. And I never say this, but somehow I said I was celibate monk. I don't know why did I say that, just maybe I had to experience what came after I said this. And the person became angry. He literally became angry. That God didn't, who taught you that? God didn't say that. You can't do that. Very upset. But Jesus was celibate. Guy was a Christian. But Jesus was celibate. And he taught all of his 12 disciples to be celibate. To not get entangled. If you read New Testament, for example, was Paul, right? Paul wrote a lot. Are you familiar with the Bible? Yeah, he wrote a lot, right? His letters are in the New Testament, right? He did a lot of traveling and, yeah, because I keep mixing Paul with Peter and, sorry.
He wrote like the book of Acts and a lot of the later half of the New Testament.
Yeah, so it's Paul. For example, when you read the New Testament, Paul tells people, if you're married, good. If you're not married, don't marry. Stay single. Like he recommended like this. And several times you find this in the New Testament. But yet this person was very offended just by the fact that he met someone who was celibate. And so this is the contrast between Zoroastrianism and Vedic culture. The reasons for which Zarathustra was ostracized from Vedic realm. And so Zarathustra basically taught similar things to what you find in Vedic culture. He taught Dharma, Artha, Kama, and no moksha. In other words, Dharma, religiosity, and if you're religious, then there is Artha, there is natural opulence, and then if there is opulence, then there is Kama, there is satisfaction of desire. Material desire, you can satisfy your desires. But then the Vedic culture continues. Now that you have seen the futility of that all, then go to moksha. And then specifically above moksha, there's also bhakti as the fifth purushartha, or the goal of human life. And so he completely rejected moksha. It's an offensive idea, or liberation from material existence. Material existence is the existence. And so last thing here about Zoroastrianism is that they Zarathustra, if you know, you can look this up even if you have your handheld device capable of going online. If you look up Zoroastrianism, you will see that the deity of Zoroastrians was known as Ahura Mazda. Ahura Mazda. Very same name that's mentioned in the Vedic texts, like that. However, Asura Mazda actually, because the Persians, how many of you know Prabhupada's explanation of how the word Hindu came about? Yeah. Okay, so it's a twist on the word Sindhu, right? People who live on the other side of the river Sindhu. So basically the Persians were switching S's and H's, S and H, like that. So Sindhus became Hindus. In other words, people who live on the other side of the river Sindhu. So similarly here, instead of Ahura Mazda, the word is actually Asura Mazda. Asura means Asura, means a demon. And so Asura Mazda is the concept of the deity, but in Vedic culture this deity is the deity of Varuna Dev, who is worshipped by the Asuras. So what's worshipped by Asuras over here is worshipped by Zarathustra as the supreme person, as God, as the supreme truth, as the absolute, as God. And And this is funny. And Brihaspati is portrayed in Zoroastrianism as the devil. But Brihaspati in Vedic culture is the spiritual teacher of the devas, or the pious beings. So what's the spiritual teacher of the pious beings in Zoroastrianism is the devil. And the person who's worshipped by the asuras or the demons in Zoroastrianism is God. It's completely the opposite. And for these reasons, Zarathustra was ostracized from Vedic culture. So apparently there's a good record of this in the Rig Veda. Now this is a bit of history, but what is a big lesson for us to learn here? The big lesson for us to learn here is that even though we may speak of different people, we may speak of different times, we may even speak of different religions, but the people are people, no matter where they're at. People are people, and they have same tendencies. In the material world, people tend to be materialistic. They tend to be asuric. And what is the asuric tendency? The asuric tendency is to seek for perfection on the material plane. Seek perfection on the material plane. And some or other hope that, I mean, everything people do, people go to school so they can get a job, so they can be happy in this world. But in Vedic culture, people would not go to school for these reasons. They would go to school so they could become morally pure, so they could be allowed to enter the presence of God, the eternal spiritual reality. Completely the opposite. But the materialistic mind, somehow or other, always hopes for the happiness and pleasure and satisfaction within the material realm. Now Krishna teaches in the Bhagavad Gita that this is literally impossible. You have many, there's a plethora of these self-help gurus who will tell you, do this, do that, tweak this, tweak that, and you will be happy in the material world. But there is no happiness in the material world. This is what Krishna teaches. And sooner you accept this, happier you will become. Because what's the point of hoping for something that's hopeless? I mean, look at our lives. Okay, we take birth. We don't have a clue what the hell is going on. We try to learn what's going on, and then we conceptualize different things, whatever society teaches us. You know, in Vedic times it was meditation, now it might be video games. But people go for it because society told them that. And then we live our life, struggle with things, and then at the end you die. At the end you die. What's the point? Like, excuse me, like, what is going on here? You let me live for a while and then I'm just gone. So to put hopes, as Srila Prabhupada used to say, that death rate is everywhere always the same. 100%. So to build these hopes about, I mean, stories, like really fairy tales, about happiness and some kind of solution within the material realm, is really to set oneself up for a lot of misery. But somehow or other, the conditioned soul is very much addicted to selfishness and personal sensual gratification, so this becomes difficult. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Abrahma bhuvana loka punar avartino Arjuna. This place is temporary. This place is temporary, Arjuna. Just do your duty here. Do what you have to do here. Become a pure devotee and get out of here. Mam upetya tu kanteya punar janmana vidyate. But one who attains me, Krishna says, for that person there's no more appearing within the physical realm. Oh, this is a good one from the Srimad Bhagavatam. Etavan sankhya yoga vyam swadharma parinishtaya janma labha para pumsa ante narayana smritihi. This verse states that that the perfection of sankhya, the perfection of yoga, the perfection of performance of dharma, the perfection of human form of life is what? To be happy in this world? No. Ante narayana smriti. This is the perfection of everything. That at the end of the day, you actually remember God. This is the perfection.
Repeat that, Prabhu? Perfection of that.
Janma labha parapumsa ante, at the end, narayana smriti. That at the end you should remember God. So the goal of life is not, we don't have to be poor and hungry, no one's saying that, but the goal of life is not to use one's energy to think how to be comfortable in this world. But the perfection is described in very spiritual terms, that in love you remember God. But the human psychology is such that humans time and time again always revert to materialism. And you find this in Vedic culture. Like if you go to India now. First time I went to India, it was like 20 years ago. First time I went to India, I was so inspired by the intensity of the emotion and devotion that pilgrims were exhibiting in these temples. But when I soon realized what they were fervent about, I was really angry. Car, doctorate, degree, the son lawyer, the daughter dentist. My goodness. That's not perfect. Perfection is ante narayana smriti. That you develop love for God so you can always think of God and never forget God. So that at the time when this body drops dead, and definitely will happen, that you can remember God. So that these thoughts of God will take you to God. Some or other people just like psychologically, I mean, we understand this, but then we continue reverting to our materialism. Some are secretly in our hearts cultivating these hopes for material happiness, but it doesn't happen. I have a huge hole. I'm 40 now. I forgot how old I was, sorry. I have a huge hole, between, that connects the mouth cavity with the sinus cavity. It's weird. It's horrible. And there's constant infection. The germs go from one cavity to another. I never expected this. I never asked for it. And then when this hole is patched, something else will happen. And then after that, something else will happen. But psychologically, what we do, when the problem goes away, we're like, oh, it's gone away. Another one will come. Therefore, Krishna teaches Arjuna in the beginning of Bhagavad Gita, Matra sparshas tu kanteya, shitoshna sukha dukada, agama apaina, anityaha, tam stitiksha, titikshasva bharata. That the material pain and material pleasure have the same purpose. And that's to distract you from thinking of God. To distract you from thinking of God. And Krishna therefore tells Arjuna, ignore both. But somehow we're in pain, and when the pain's gone, we're like, okay, it's gone, no more. But don't put your hopes up. I mean, another one will come right afterwards. In other words, Ichcha dvesha samutena dvandva mohina bharata. Sarva bhutani samoha sargayanti parantava. Krishna telling Arjuna, this is Bhagavad Gita, that this is the illusion that binds the soul to the miserable material existence. It's called Ichcha and Dvesha. Ichcha means you want it, and what do you want? You want material pleasure. And Dvesha, you hate. What do you hate? You hate material pain. And in this way you never think of God. You just think of material pleasure and material pain. This is like a ping pong, like that table tennis ball. You know, it's very bouncy, right? It just bounces back and forth all the time. And so you find this in Zoroastrianism, and you find this contamination in what's known as Western religions, and you definitely find this in Vedic tradition. Because that's what people do. But solution is transcendental, it's not terrestrial. So, are there any questions or comments? Oh, what's the schedule? I wasn't even paying attention. No one said anything. It's 6:45. Okay, well, what follows? Because I don't want to interrupt this game.
We have Kirtan Bhajan
Kirtan.
till 7:15.
Till 7:15. Okay. You don't do arati?
We do Aarti at 7:15.
7:15. Okay. All right. So if there are any questions or comments, we can entertain them at this point.
I have a question. So in Zoroastrianism, you said that there's this concept of duality, that God and evil are equal, and you said that Christianity is a derivative of Zoroastrianism. I'm not sure.
Well, that's the point. I didn't go into it, but Western religions, and some people will disagree with this, but there's a very, very significant number of academic scholars who claim that Western religions originated in Zoroastrianism. That Zoroastrianism is the origin of Western religions.
So then, how is that explained that in Christianity they don't have, you said in Bible that they don't have like God as
okay. You cannot be Christian just by having Bible only. In the sense that Bible does not contain enough information to teach you. Bible doesn't even tell you where did you come from, what are you doing here, what's the nature of ignorance. None of this. None of this. Especially Old Testament is basically a historical account, and very inaccurate historical account of a group of people, specifically the tribe of Israel. And then the New Testament is a compilation of remembrances of Jesus by some of his disciples, some of his followers, like that. That's the Bible. And the Bible is not a philosophical work. There's no doctrine, and there's no philosophy. There's no, like Bhagavad Gita teaches philosophy. In the Bible is not that. There's no philosophical construct shown anywhere taught in the Bible, New or Old Testament. And in the New Testament we find some of the teachings of Jesus as he spoke to people, but he doesn't tell you how to practice, how to be a Christian, like that. Most of Christian practices came afterwards from people who build up their experiences on basic things that were taught in the Bible. Like Jesus taught to love God with your heart and soul, right? What's the line? Love thy God with all your heart and your soul, something like that, yeah. Also in the Bible, Jesus is said, stated that the New Testament, that you should pray ceaselessly, constantly. You should constantly pray. But what's the prayer and so on? There's a famous Christian work by an unknown author. It's called the Pilgrim. The Way of a Pilgrim. The Way of a Pilgrim. And this is a person who read the Bible and he was inspired by this statement. You should pray ceaselessly. And he was wondering, so what does this mean? So he went from one person to another person until finally someone gave him a Christian prayer and told him to chant this prayer all the time. First gave him a rosary and told him to chant this so many times on the rosary. And then after each month, this teacher increased the number of rounds, like that, until he was chanting so much that his jaw was hurting. But it's interesting. Then in this book he writes his realizations. Very interesting. What I found interesting about his realizations that are identical to mine. And not only they're identical to mine, but they're even the order in which these realizations appear to him were identical to the order in which these realizations appear to me. Very interesting, like that. But nevertheless, my point is to go back, that just based on the Bible, you would have a difficult time being a Christian, because there's not enough instruction. Yes.
You said that Zarathustra was mentioned in the Rig Veda, but you also said that the Rig Veda is a lot older. Then how does he appear in the Rig Veda if he's not of the same time?
Yeah. If you notice afterwards, I said for the most part. In other words, Vedic texts, you can trace the age of certain Vedic texts by different means. Like, for example, by morphing of, or not morphing, that's not a good, there's a technical term for change in language. Like, there's obvious difference between Old Sanskrit and New Sanskrit, for example. So like that, you can see how Sanskrit texts are of different ages, like that. So it covers a large period of time. We often hear that Vedic texts are eternal. So how can we then speak of younger or older Vedic texts? Srila Saraswati Thakur gave the analogy of a horse track. On the horse track you have horses running, and imagine yourself sitting in a box, and you can only see the one section of the horse track by looking through an opening in the wall. And so when the horse appears, there's a horse. But the horse has been out there all along. Just now you saw it. So similarly, Vedic texts are said to be eternal in the sense that that's eternal knowledge. And eternal knowledge is eternally true, because absolute truth, unlike relative truth, is always true. So the Vedic truth is eternally so. But literally, Vedic texts make their way into the human minds and hearts in due course of time. So for example, you can totally date Bhagavad Gita. That doesn't mean that. But yet we say Bhagavad Gita is eternal. That's how that works. And then of course in each creation there are references to patterns of creation, in other words patterns that repeat all the time. And then there's also references to very specific events within particular creation. Like that. So Zarathustra is there in the Rig Veda. Okay, everyone happy?
Quick comment.
Yes, Prabhuji.
The Christians actually do not even have the basic concept of the identity of the soul.
Excuse me?
I think that the Christians.
Oh, Because it's not in the Bible, there is no...
There's a dust. And because you are dust, the dust you will go back.
Correct, there are very specific things stated in the Bible that makes you think. I mean, it really gives you this picture that you are the physical body, that you're not a metaphysical being within the body. So there's no concept of soul in the Bible.
And therefore there is no pre-existence of the soul.
Excuse me?
And therefore there is no pre-existence.
Pre-existence, yeah. So, I mean, there is in the Old Testament there is a book called Kings, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, what is this? This is a list of different kings, and it usually says when they were born, stuff they did, and then they died. And then literally at the end of description of each of the kings, it says, he's eternally gone. It literally says, he's eternally gone. He's no more. Gone forever. We, of course, in Vedic culture, that's so much not so. Yes, Fruji? Oh.
So where does the concept of this burning eternally in hell come then? If they thought
See, first when I read the Bible, I was very angry. I'm serious, I was very angry. But then later on I realized that I was angry because I referred to Bible as the way my parents told me. But once I looked at the Bible not as this book from which a religion came, but rather as a product of a certain tribe, then everything made sense. So for example, in the Bible, you read, there are references to a place, I forget the name of it, to a place. And at first I couldn't tell whether it was a place or a mountain or a name of a person, like what, because it repeated it several times. And so of course, nowadays you just go online on the internet and look it up. So I looked it up, and what it is, it says that it was a concept of hell referred to in the Old Testament, of a place that's something like hell. And now the question is, could you please now do that?
He's chanting.
Okay. But still, we're also chanting Hare Krishna. And, so now you wonder, wait a second, if this is the book, because this is how my parents, my whole tradition, Catholics, that's what they told me, my priest told me this, that this is the book, this is the evidence, there's no other book, upon which, this is where you derive all of your knowledge from. Excuse me, there's reference to this place, and it's not even mentioned in the book, like, what is it? That means that there is some other book, the concepts that were taught in the Bible were already known before the Bible. And so you have a lot of things like this in the Bible. And it's a book that's just replete with inconsistencies, like serious inconsistencies. And you can actually, I looked it up online, there are courses you can take, academic courses on Bible, which I didn't, but but I did read the, what do they call that, the overview of the course overview of it, but I'm not sure what they call that. What's the technical term? Syllabus. And there were certain notes there, so I went through it, and yeah, I mean, very interesting questions like that, and so they make these points that obviously Bible was a product of a group of people. Definitely there are biblical authors. And Bible means a compilation of books. That's literally what it means. And you can see there are different authors in the book, and sometimes they differ in opinion to each other on a matter, on historic accounts and so on. like that. So it's not some kind of, because that's why I was angry. And there's so much violence in this book. So much violence, it hurts your mind. That someone will consider this book divine or some kind of divine revelation. There's so much violence. Like, I mean, if you want, I can give you descriptions of it. It's so bad, you may not be able to sleep. It's so nasty. But if you think of it as an account of a group of people, then it makes sense. Who were savages themselves to a large extent, and who lived in the area of the world that was very much savage-like. I mean, killing of women and children, and by all nasty means. I mean, even God doing a lot of killing. I mean, like, really just... And all the time threatening, you know. If you obey God, you know, if you obey God, you will have goats, you will have sheep, you will have many women, you will have, I don't know, I'm not sure what women get, but you will, like this, you will have many children, you will have a big tent, because there were nomads, so they lived in tents. This is stated all the time. And if you don't obey God, then God will punish you. And then he goes into like page after page, you know, chapter after chapter, horrible descriptions of what will God do to you if you don't worship Him. It's like, this is insanity. This is obviously a book written for savages. But then again, in the middle of all this savage-like stuff, you find stuff that's exquisitely beautiful. Like exquisitely beautiful. But obviously came from a totally different author. So once I looked at the book like that, I actually gained a lot. I learned so much from the book. And first time I was just angry. How can this be concept of divinity? This is nasty. And same thing could happen to someone who comes to Vedic tradition. For example, in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna tells Arjuna that most of the Vedas are materialistic, and therefore you should abandon them. Traigunya Vishaya Veda, Nistraigunya Upavarjuna. Arjuna, just throw away these Vedas. They're mostly materialistic, and they are. But Krishna is cool enough to say that. Whereas, you know, I ran into so many Christians saying, no, everything that says there, it's divine. I'm sorry, but, you know, I can't...
It also says that Veda is Narayan himself.
Veda Narayana, Vedo Narayana Sakshat Swayambhu, what is it? Veda Narayana Sakshat Swayambhu Iti Shushruma. 6th canto, right? Yeah, 6th canto. Correct. The low class stuff for low class people. Like when you go to change oil, it says free oil change. And you go in and then they inspect your vehicle so they can find something in the car, you know, and say, oh yeah, we change your oil, but you know, you better fix this because, you know, I don't know. You may not make it too far from here. And then you pay him to fix that, right? So that's how Vedas, every teacher does the same thing. Moms have to sugarcoat medicine for dumb children who don't want to take the medicine. Because they can't understand, they have to. It's for their good. So they have to hide it sugarcoat it. You know, they think, oh, nice, sweet, but it's medicine. So Krishna does the same thing. There's all this materialistic stuff. But then at least you brought into the shop. Then Krishna will make you fix other things too. Slowly.
What is the source of the quote that the goal of life is, you know, education is Narayan Smriti?
What is it? Excuse me. That's the, I can tell you. Bhagavatam 2:16. 2:16.
Like if Christianity, they don't believe in soul and all those things, so then how can they explain that so much research is going on on rebirth and all those things which is not proven? How do they explain that to them?
Yeah, well, first of all, you have to understand that Christianity is not one tradition. Just like Hinduism is not one thing. You're really talking about a whole lot of different people, a whole lot of different groups, and people with utterly opposing beliefs. So even though we call this one Christian tradition, but it's so variegated. And then also within the same school or within the same tradition, within the same Vedic Christian institution, you'll find people who are very base in their behavior, very base in their emotion, very base in their action, and very base in their understanding. And so you find the same thing in ISKCON, for example. Some people are very base, and they just learn a few dogmatic points, and they're happy with that. But it goes way beyond that. Krishna says in the 4th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita that the point of religion is to understand, to change your understanding, so you see everything differently. Not just to learn a few dogmatic points. Even we often say chant Hare Krishna and be happy, we emphasize chanting of Hare Krishna, but the sound Hare Krishna is defined as actually a call from the heart of the soul to God. So you don't even have to say Hare Krishna. You can say anything. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Oh God, oh God. Of course, Hare Krishna, that mantra also has certain meaning that's very rich and esoteric, and so to that extent so.
Well, you said that the Vedas, they're eternal truth, right? But you said the Krishna says that cast out the material Vedas. But if they're eternal truth, then why Krishna say that you should cast them out?
Because the ignorance of people is nothing new. There's nothing new on the horizon. So ignorance is always the same. And so therefore, the sugar coating business has been going on since ever. Do you follow? Yeah. So you have this large sections of the Vedas that are like that materialistic. Dharma, Artha, Kama. And then a little bit of moksha.
One day Prabhuji, we came in last 3-4 days in India. There is a Baba who is caught, who is arrested because he was a kissing Baba. So he was curing people by kissing Baba. So this type of stuff.
One such rascal died a few years ago. There was Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He came and he was a very strict sannyasi. He would not come anywhere close to a female. There's no disrespect, it was a sannyasi, so he was being very strict about that. And so some years ago this rascal Indian guy came and he was claiming to be incarnation of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And he was saying that Mahaprabhu came and gave mercy to everyone except women, which is not true, by the way, but he was referring to Mahaprabhu not letting women come close to him, because women would offer obeisances to Mahaprabhu from afar. And therefore he said, now I have come to give mercy to women. Rascal. He literally said this. And thank God he is now dead and gone. And probably went to some dark place. Dark and hot.
You never know though. If he put his mind so much in Mahaprabhu, he must have attained.
Yeah, but to put the mind of Mahaprabhu, you have to conceive of Mahaprabhu as he is, not as a monster that you portray him. Okay, he was absorbed in himself, that's the point. And he literally went around hugging women, and way more than hugging. I can tell you details about his attempted visit to San Diego. And then some stupid people from our congregation were going to hire a private jet to fly this fool down there. And he kept increasing, and eventually came to $40,000 for him to visit just one day, plus private jet. And they agree even to that. And then he asked that he sleeps with the wife of the host where he was going to stay. And that's when they cut it. That was the end of Kripalu. That's his name, rascal. But people are so stupid. Big sadhu, they'll come and bless our home. And then we'll make a lot of money. We'll be prosperous.
When and what incidents brought you into Krishna consciousness?
Not one, but many. A series of incidences. Too long of a story. We're about to run out of time. Shall we chant Hare Krishna a little bit?
Yeah.
Till 7:15?
Can you do one bhajan?
Yeah.
Maybe Prabhu, next time you can cover those.
Rama
Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare
It is 7:20.